I've had the Tyranid portion of my Leviathan box just kind of sitting around gathering dust for a little while now. I didn't know what to do with them. I've painted a few test models here and there, playing with some schemes, but I didn't fall in love with anything until I painted the little Neuraloid. I decided I wanted to paint the entire army in this kind of color scheme, but I didn't really have a purpose, and then I figured, why not give them away to you guys? So I'm painting this entire army, and the plan is to give it away to someone that supports me on Patreon. So I guess the video is sponsored by that. So if you want to support me in making these videos, go check out my Patreon and you could be the winner of this entire Tyranid force once it's done. So to start out this army, I primed all of the models black. I'm going to be showing it on two models specifically, a Von Ryan's Leaper and the Neuro Tyrant. I base coated the model with Games Workshop's Corn Red. I just used a few thin layers through an airbrush, but you could easily do this with a regular brush. I then used a zenithal style of painting, so top down to create some natural shadows, and I used Games Workshop's Evil Sun Scarlet. The next step was mixing up a little wash. This was 1 part Doomfire Magenta, 1 part Blood Angels Red, and 1 part Contrast Medium, all from Games Workshop. And then I slather that all over every red part of the miniature. I wanted to keep this scheme relatively simple, so I just went in with a dry brush. For this, I'm just using makeup brushes. They have plenty of bristles, they're very soft, so they're perfect for dry brushing. I believe I'm using Games Workshop's Evil Sun Scarlet immediately after the wash, just to bring it up to that kind of mid-tone. And then afterwards, I go in with another pass of Games Workshop Wild Rider Red. Then with a small brush, I go in and just pick out some of the raised areas with a small little spotlight of Troll Slayer Orange. I'm pretty reserved with this. I just kind of want to make it look like some light is reflecting off the highest point, as well as add a little bit more orange in there for some more color variation. Speaking of color variation, I shot some violet ink from Vallejo onto the undercarriage of all the models, just to add a little bit of a purple shadow and darken up the underside a bit. This was now the most annoying part of the paint job, and this is the part that I'm the least fan of painting any Tyranids. I went and covered all of the carapace with a quick pass of Black Templar contrast paint, just to get it down quickly, and then using a 50-50 mix of dark grey, I forget the color, but any warm grey, and black, I base coated the carapace. I then started all of the carapace armor with just roughly brushing in some scale color Gobi brown. This is one of my favorite brown colors. After this, I go back to the kind of makeup brush dry brushing, and I slowly add more and more white to the Gobi brown and just pick up a smaller area of the carapace each time. I have to give apologies again about my voice. I still have not gotten over this flu. It's been about a week and a half now, and it's driving me insane. I then use Doomfire Magenta to just go over the little fleshy parts on the Leaper. I just wanted to give a little bit of variation to these sections because I then add some white directly to the contrast paint just to create a thin pink. And then a little bit more white and some Cadian flesh tone just to create a fleshy tone for these little, I don't know what you'd call them, little ribs. Now I would love to take credit for this, but I actually stole this from Trevelyan. So if you haven't watched any of his Tyranid videos, check them out. They're really great. But I kind of wanted to blend the carapace pieces in with all of the flesh a little bit more, make it look a little bit more natural. So I went in with a thin coat of Corn Red and then a following thin coat of Evil Sun Scarlet, and just added kind of like a little wash into the outer edges of all of the carapace. Then using an airbrush, I went over the little face tentacles and the bottom of the tentacles on the Neuro Tyrant with some Cadian flesh tone. I then went over the face tentacles with some Doomfire Magenta again, and then added some Cadian flesh tone and increasingly small amounts of white to just kind of dot highlight the tentacles. I just used some Liquitex titanium white ink to go over the eyes. That's because I cover them with Vallejo's Fluoro Magenta, just as I will with all of the glowy brain bits. I just use an airbrush with the same Liquitex white ink just to add a little bit of a kind of bright glowy halo for when I go over it with the fluoro paint after this. You could easily do this with a dry brush as well. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, I'm just doing some thin passes with the Fluoro Magenta and building up that opacity across all of the white parts. I forgot to film, but I just used a thin brush and painted in some white ink onto the raised areas on the tentacles and just into the kind of center veins where I want it to be brightest again on the brain. And then I did a couple of more thin passes with the magenta. This will tint the bright white parts as well as darkening the previously painted areas. I then used some fluoro purple and went over the raised areas of the brain. This is just to darken them up and add a little bit more contrast to everything. And this is how the eyes look with just some brushed on magenta over the top of the white ink. I've had my little helper kind of just acting sad the whole time, because I've been home from work, so she's been keeping me company. I then painted the bases a generic grey and just kind of went over them with a khaki green with a dry brush. And using Vallejo's metal colour, I painted the little pipe and then added some bright titanium, specifically around where I want some glow effect to come off that little tentacle. It's now time to kind of cheat and make the bases look good very quickly, I'm just using AK Interactive Snow and kind of pasting or dry brushing it over the raised parts where it would pick up. I didn't film this very well, but I just did some thin layers with an airbrush around those tentacles, so there's a little bit of glow coming onto the white snow and the metal around them. Kind of really ties it into the base. Then, of course, the most important step is painting those base rims black. Black is the only color you should be using, and if you think otherwise, you're wrong. And for a quick little afternoon paint job while I'm homesick from work, I would say these guys look pretty good. I'm happy with this test scheme, so I'm quite excited to paint the whole army this way. If you got anything from this video, make sure you subscribe and like the video. Let me know what you'd like to see more of in the comments, and if you guys want a chance to win this army as well as support me, check out my Patreon, linked in the description. Really appreciate that. Thanks guys, I'll see you in the next one.